Today we're going to talk through 9 weird ways that the military changes you in your life, and a lot of these are things that people just don't even think about. The very first one here is that you're probably going to develop a weird relationship with food. You see, while you are at recruit training, you're going to just have to shovel all your food in as fast as humanly possible. And that's true whether you're on the skinny rations trying to lose weight or the double rations because you're trying to gain weight. You're going to have to shovel all that food in very quickly while drill instructors are breathing down your neck. And through that and through all your other training evolutions and not always having a ton of time to eat, so you kind of eat on the go and eat here and do this and do that, you're going to develop the unique skill set of shoveling food down your throat. And you're probably going to end up realizing even years down the road that you eat your food very quickly. And there's not necessarily anything inherently wrong with that, but it does kind of provide an interesting situation when you've cleared your plate of the meal and you're ready to move on and people are just starting. Right? This is just something you'll probably end up having to work on one day when you decide that you don't want to choke and die on a pretzel or on a half-chewed piece of steak or whatever the case, and you want to actually be able to enjoy your meal rather than stuffing your face so fast you don't realize you should have stopped eating 5 minutes ago and you're full. Number 2 is hypervigilance, or basically mental shifts. And this is essentially being on edge or on the lookout at all times. One of the things that I think is the most common identifier of service members or characteristics of service members, especially those who've deployed, is that they will almost never voluntarily sit with their back to an opening. So if you go in a restaurant, you can almost guarantee that the person on the outside wall, sitting at a table with their back to the wall so they can see, is probably the veteran at the table. In fact, you'll even see veterans trying to not fight over it, but, go for that chair amongst each other in the case of multiple hanging out, because we just simply do not like the idea of somebody staring over us or listening over us, or worse, being able to, sneak up behind you in a situation where you just don't want that. And while there's almost never any reason that this actually needs to be the case, we all go for it. And I was recently dating a young lady who even pointed out the fact that she appreciated how observant I was. And I'm like, I can't turn this off. It's from deployments and from this and from that. It is learned behavior, and I am going to stay vigilant all the time. Number 3 here is walking in sync. And this is something that'll come specifically out of boot camp when you start marching all the time, and everywhere you go, you guys are in formation marching, and you will just notice that naturally, especially Marines, you just kind of end up syncing your step because you've done so much walking and marching in formation that it just feels more natural to be in step than to be off. Number 4 is that you will probably become a little bit better at public speaking, which is the largest fear in the world for most people. And not everybody is going to develop this skill set, especially in high school. I mean, I was a nerdy homeschool kid who did not have, my public speaking was in front of my mom, right? And so I didn't have a lot of experience with this. And while I was always a decent communicator, I was never really one for public speaking. And you learn this slowly in the military because you may end up speaking at an award ceremony, or I actually narrated a Marine Corps ball at one point, and you're going to have to get good at, responding when you're on duty post, and you're going to end up talking to people a lot in the line of duty and pull yourself out of that comfort shell a little bit, and you're going to learn basic public speaking behavior, and then it's going to just compound if you're like me and you end up on recruiting duty where you actually get to go and learn professional speaking tips and tricks and how to stop dropping the F word everywhere, and how to actually very normal public speaking skills that most people just never have to learn. Number 5 here is that your BS detector is going to get a little sharper. And if you followed my content on Instagram for a while, you've probably noticed me calling people out for BS. In fact, I've even got a sign that says no BS behind me in reference to the book that I wrote called The No BS Guide to Military Life, which, total side note, but if you scan this QR code, you can download a free copy. It's everything I wish I'd known when I first joined the military. It will help you on your journey. That said, you're going to get a whole bunch of the tough guy made up stories where people try to talk about being deployed or how tough this was in training and that, or you're going to realize when you go home that a lot of your friends and family members will kind of try to inflate stories to seem cool around you because they feel almost as if they're almost compensating for the fact that they did not join the military. The National Guard, you guys are going to hate me saying this, but the National Guard is actually kind of guilty of this as well. I've noticed that a lot of the people who join the National Guard will go out of their way to talk about how they're all special forces or snipers, which they're not all, to kind of compensate for the fact that they didn't go active duty. And I am not throwing any shade at reservists or National Guardsmen, but if you weren't comfortable enough with that choice that you feel good about being National Guard or reservists. Like when you start coming up to us and talking about how badass you are to like overcompensate for the fact that we're active duty and you're not, we're going to call you out on it because we see it all the time. This is the same thing as how almost every branch of service has a story for how they almost joined the Marine Corps, and it's usually something like this. An Army guy will walk up to you and say, I almost joined the Marine Corps, but when I told the recruiter I just wanted to kill people, he said no. That wouldn't happen. Or, I almost joined the Marine Corps, but I just knew that if one of those drill instructors got in my face, I'd fight them. No, you wouldn't. And that also never happened. And I say that with love, but these are experiences I had as a Marine where I've heard all this stuff. But your BS detector is going to get better. You're going to catch all these BS tough guy things, and you're not going to have any patience for it. You're also going to get to the point where you can tell if somebody's actually had a combat experience or not based on the way they talk about it, and you're going to discredit some people, unfortunately, who, had they just kept to a normal story instead of inflating it, you would have just left them alone. And you're probably going to get a little bit more blunt and straightforward with your communication, where you just kind of cut things off when it's just a waste of time and move on with your life. You'll probably become a habitual overpacker, overpreparer. Almost every trip I go on, I come back and I'm like, I did not need half this crap. You bring extra clothes, you bring, maybe I'll go do this, this, and this, so I need all these different shoes when you could have just gotten by with a pair of shoes. Or, maybe I'll need, whatever it is. I believe it comes from the mentality that the military has, which is that it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And we habitually pack more than we need for deployments and training exercises, but even once you get out, just traveling the world, because you're like, well, who knows? And you just pack a bunch of crap, and that just is what it is. You can also sleep anywhere, at any time. This is a learned habit where you can just get on an airplane and crash, or whatever. And I don't know if this is necessarily a superpower, but it could be seen as a superpower for a lot of people. Number 7 is you're going to develop a dark sense of humor, right? And this is, call it a love-hate, but like service members have pretty crude humor. Now, some of it is just incredibly downright inappropriate, and some of it is just dark, i.e. we use humor as kind of a coping skill for some of the things we've gone through, been through, done, seen, whatever. And that often catches civilians off guard, and they don't really know how to interact or react to some of the things we joke about that are just plain would never be joked about in the civilian world, like death, right? Or sexuality or whatever. We are just not exactly always the most PC of human beings, and take it or leave it, not always the best thing, but at least we're authentic. And I would say that's probably a little more prevalent in roles that lean towards, combat or higher stress, higher payload, higher workload type stuff, where you're really kind of in that like almost trauma bond closeness with the people you work with. It's basically a big locker room. Number 8 is that you're going to develop a bigger worldview. So things like cultural experiences, right? For example, I grew up in a small town in Arkansas. And while I had been around African Americans and Asian Americans and whatever growing up, it was on a much smaller scale than I had been around Caucasian Americans. And I had never really been fully exposed to the cultures of a lot of these different ethnic groups, right? Just wasn't a huge population where I grew up. Not a bad thing. Had nothing against them. Was my experience. White redneck dudes playing country music is kind of how I grew up, right? Joined the military. Boom! Very equal melting pot. And all of a sudden, I've got a roommate who's from Mexico, second language is English, and that is a culture shock. Or I've got people in my platoon from Nigeria or from Compton or from, San Francisco, like just different parts of the country, different nationalities, different ethnic groups, different upbringings. And we are in a world where we're not racist. Like we don't give a you are who you are, so you start exploring these cultures. Like when I went to Japan, we would go and explore all the different cultures, and we would play this game where like you'd have $10, you'd go to the grocery store, and the rule was you couldn't buy anything if you could tell what it was. And so you'd come back and you'd all share whatever you got, and some of it was downright gross, and some of it was amazing, and you'd explore the culture, get on a bicycle, and go for a ride, and do all this different stuff. And so you got to explore cultures. I saw a ton of different countries and cultures in those first few years, but I mean, the biggest culture shocks obviously were like Japan, totally different country, but still pretty first world. Afghanistan and Kyrgyzstan, not first world, very different cultures and countries than where I grew up in Arkansas. And so you are going to get to be more, pronounced, so to speak, as far as cultures go, which is always kind of funny because now, again, you go back to the dark humor, I can poke fun at people from different cultures, different ethnicities, different countries, based on stereotypes about that culture, and then you hear this right now, people are already like thinking in their head like, oh, we got to cancel this. No, because if you make a cultural reference joke with somebody from that culture, they laugh. They get it. They're like, oh, he sees me, right? And so like my team that works in the Philippines, I make jokes about how they better not ever try to get me to eat balut, which is just this very cultural delicacy in the Philippines that I want absolutely nothing to do with. But if I hadn't interacted with people from the Philippines, I would have no idea what that was. And I could not make jokes like that. And I would just, so all that being said, you're going to change, you're going to get to be a little bit more rounded culturally. Similarly, you're going to have friendships that defy the norm because whether we like it or not, people generally end up next to like people. So if there's 3 women and 10 men in the room, the women will probably end up talking. If there's 3 of any specific, it could be a race, it could be a culture, it could be a hobby, right? It could be 3 people who like mountain biking in a room of 10. You hang out long enough and they all figure out they like mountain biking, they're going to start hanging out. People generally end up, interacting with people that they have similarities with, people that they get along with, right? In the military, you are going to work across all branches and cultures, and that's kind of going to disappear, at least to an extent, because you're going to be open to interacting with people who have nothing in common with you, and you're going to realize that you guys just work together, and that's all you really need in common because you go through life together. You're also going to have a different perception of age, meaning at 20 years old, I'm in Afghanistan leading 85 vehicle convoys through the desert, so when I come back and my 20-year-old friends are being heads, and I'm like, well, they're dumb, and so I've always acted a little bit more mature, right? That's just a normal piece of the military helping you grow up quickly. And some things that used to bother you just won't. They'll seem trivial, especially like you come out of boot camp and you're like, oh no, the toaster broke. Who cares? Because it just seems trivial. Like, oh, we're 2 minutes late or whatever. Like there are things that just no longer matter when put in the grand scheme of like recruit training or life and death situations on deployments or, whatever, that you'll have a lower threshold for what or a higher threshold, I guess, for what bothers you. Oh, and number 9 here, this one was actually not weird for me at all, but the sir, ma'am. It's like if you grew up in Texas, in Arkansas, in Mississippi, in Louisiana, here, Alabama, Georgia, like whatever, in the South, you say yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. That's how you grew up, right? If you didn't, you probably have never said anything sir, ma'am in your entire freaking life if you're from like New York City, right? Or San Francisco. And if you did, they would probably make fun of you. And I know that because when I go to places like that sometimes and I say sir or ma'am, people are like, huh? It's like a weird, you like say yes sir to a waiter and the waiter is like, I don't know how to respond to that. Like, I'm not that old. And you're like, it's, whatever. Joining the military, you are going to very quickly be indoctrinated to yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, aye sir, aye ma'am, whatever, when it comes to how you interact. That is going to be drilled into you at recruit training, at OCS, at whatever, and that is going to be something that stays with you for the duration of your career anytime you're talking to a senior officer or an officer in general if you're enlisted like I was. And that'll be something that probably sticks with you when you interact even with civilians, because it's just your go-to default respectful response going forward. And that is something that will probably change for a lot of you. But again, if you grew up in the South, totally normal. So it didn't seem like a huge deal to me, but I realized that is actually a culture change for a lot of people. So there you have it, 9 things about you that are probably going to change in one way or another while in the military that most people don't have any idea about unless you've been in the military and then you can spot it from a freaking mile away. Right? Which is kind of why, like 2 months ago, I was in Spain and this gentleman sat next to me and within like 30 seconds, I was like, you're a Marine. And he's like, how the hell do you know that? And like, just had an idea. And he was a Marine. We were hanging out in Spain, ran the bulls together. Kind of cool. And had no idea other than just those interactions. And you just kind of pick up on it. You can pick them out of a crowd. What did I miss? Veterans, what changed about you that you didn't expect? Drop the comments in the below and we will see what kind of the craziest things are, because I bet you there's something funny that I missed that almost everybody has going for them.